we always hold our breath to make sure that we don't have trouble with our technology. So anyway, we are very happy today to have Jamie Reaver with us, who is the Executive Director of Kansas Appleseed. But before we get to her, we just have a few things. I think if you're not muted, please go ahead and mute so that we don't have any background noises. And we'll have everybody put their questions in the chat. And Jamie will take questions after she's done presenting. And I need, in case there's somebody new here, Women for Kansas is a nonpartisan organization, and we advocate for moderate legislative priorities or policies and legislators or candidates, both. And we have several objectives, or I guess, Susan, what do we call what we stand for? Where's my list? Shoot, I had it right here. Here it is. Our legislative priorities. Sorry.
Priorities, yes.
Had a brain misfire there. And I'm just going to go through a couple of them that are, I think, really important right now. One of them is a court system free from political influence. And we're going to be voting on that August 4th. Equal rights for all, reproductive rights and bodily autonomy, and so on and so forth. And you can find all that on it's all written out, womenforkansas.org. That's our website. And just go there, and you will also find recordings of other virtual chapter meetings. And another thing that I want to mention is we kind of changed our membership. It's now a donation funded. So if you would like to give a donation, it will also show you how to do that on the website. And we use the donations for educational opportunities just like this, the newsletter, technical things like to pay for the Zoom license, and well, for the issue coming up to fight for a free and impartial judicial system, especially in the Supreme Court. Let's see, announcements. Next month on March 8th, we will meet again, and we will meet with Protecting Kansas Children from Sexual Predators. And that is the group that's currently, right now, trying to get a bill passed that would implement Aaron's Law. Aaron's Law is in 38 states now. Once again, Kansas is one of the last to pass this, but it would provide, and I want to make sure I get this right, it would implement sexual abuse prevention, requiring public schools to teach age-appropriate body safety. And I did send out an email. They are accepting testimony on that bill right now. Everything is fast, fast, fast this legislative session. So please read that email. This is so important. I was a CASA volunteer and an advocate for children in need of care. And this is just something that should have been done a long time ago. Okay. Now, did I forget anything, Susan?
No, that sounds good.
Okay.
Next month, again, will be another important subject. Please
Yes,
attend.
very. Okay, now, Jamie, as I said, Executive Director of Kansas Appleseed, an amazing organization. It's a nonprofit, or she'll tell you this probably, but nonprofit advocacy and public policy organization. And Jamie believes deeply that nonprofit organizations have the power to change communities for the better, and has spent her entire career in the nonprofit sector. Prior to joining Kansas Appleseed in 2019, she served as the executive director of the United Way of the Flint Hills, where she led community efforts to deepen understanding on critical issues, including poverty, access to quality childcare, early and childhood education. She received her BA in English from Texas Women's University and her PA from Seattle University. She's active in her community, of course, and is a member of the Emporia Public Schools Board of Education. she's a busy lady, and we appreciate you taking your Sunday to do this for us.
Oh, can I mention,
Yes.
if you have a question, please put it in chat and we'll make sure that we get to it.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much. And I'm going to share my screen to get set up for the presentation. So bear with me just 1 second. Share now. Okay, are you all seeing my screen quite yet? Or are you still seeing me?
Yes.
Okay,
We see the
great.
screen.
Perfect. Okay. Okay, here we go. So I'm really happy to talk to you today about Kansas Appleseed and the work that we do. So I'm going to start off giving you just a quick overview of what we do as an organization, talk about food insecurity in the state of Kansas. Then I'm going to talk about what the Kansas legislature has done to make it more difficult for people to access food benefits, and then talk about how the One Big Beautiful Bill, which is not so beautiful and not so kind, is hurting Kansans even more deeply. And then what the Kansas legislature is doing right now to deepen those cuts and make it even more difficult. So that's a lot to cover in the next probably 25 to 30 minutes. And so I'll try not to go too deep into the weeds, but some of this is just really egregious. And so I want to make sure that you know everything that you need to know in order to contact your own legislators. So, as Pam mentioned, Kansas Appleseed is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization working together to build a state full of thriving, inclusive, and just communities. And so, what that looks like for us is working with elected officials at every level of government to create better policies and laws. And so, we do that through grassroots advocacy. We listen to communities about the problems they're facing. We do our own research and write our own briefs on what the issues are and what policies could improve the lives for Kansans. We take that advocacy to the school board room, the state house, to Congress to get laws passed. And if none of that works, and we feel like there are policies and laws that are especially egregious, we can file lawsuits, which we have done on numerous occasions around voting rights, about improving the foster care system, and fighting back on some really bad voter suppression laws that have passed out of the state house in recent years. Now, the words thriving, inclusive, and just really make up the pillars of our work at Kansas Appleseed. So in our Thriving campaign, that's where we're just really trying to end hunger. We believe deeply that no Kansan, no one in the world, in the breadbasket of the world here in Kansas, should anyone go hungry. In our inclusive campaign, we want to make sure that every Kansan gets out to vote. A lot of people think that because you're a nonprofit organization that you can't, interact around elections, but you most certainly can. Our policy at Kansas Appleseed as a nonpartisan organization is that we want Kansans to vote on policies and not people. So we advocate for the policies that will improve people's lives and educate them about what those policies are. And then in our Just campaign, we're working to reform the youth and adult justice systems as well as the foster care system. As you all mentioned, thinking about Aaron's Law, how Kansas is now one of 12 states having not passed a law. It's interesting that we find ourselves in that category a lot here in Kansas. Kansas is one of 11 states that still permits kids to be shackled when they make a court appearance. And so, there's things that we need to do better in our state. And so that's really what we're working on at Kansas Appleseed. So today's presentation is really about SNAP changes at the state and federal level. And so I'm going to talk about that, in the next 12 or so slides. What I do want to note, especially because this is being recorded, I put the date February 8th, 2026 on this slide because this is current as of today. The Kansas legislature is in session. The session is going especially fast. And so I can promise you that the slideshow or elements of the slideshow will be outdated by the end of next week as bills get passed out of committee. And so I'll flag what those might look like as we get into those discussions. So I want to kind of give you the lay of the land of what hunger looks like in our state. Right now, 1 in 9 Kansans face food insecurity. That means they don't know where their next meal is going to come from. Out of our 105 Kansas counties, 74 of them have higher food insecurity than the national average. And rural communities are especially hit the hardest. In Southeast Kansas, 1 in 4 kids is facing food insecurity. And this is kind of an example of where our civic engagement work and our hunger work overlap, because we know that Southeast Kansas is among the most hungry of our Kansas communities. They also have some of the lowest voter turnout. And so again, that's why we engage so deeply in civic engagement, because we want to remind people that when you get out and vote on policies that can increase food security, that can give you better schools, that can improve your access to health care, you have the power to create the community that you want. And so this is something that we just keep repeating over and over in our communities. So let me just move something. Okay, so one of the best ways to help folks who are hungry gain access to food assistance is through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Fortunately, one of our state's own, the late great Senator Bob Dole, found a way for our country to reduce hunger, and that is through the SNAP program. Unfortunately, since he, really advocated for it, and in the 1970s especially, we've seen that program be decimated through the years. So what SNAP does is it provides Kansans or anyone in the United States with food assistance benefits on an EBT card, which I'm sure you've all seen them, at the grocery store. It looks just like a credit card. And the benefits are based on household income, expenses, and family size. Right now, almost 187,000 households supporting children, seniors, and people with disabilities and working families receive SNAP. Every dollar in SNAP benefit generates more than $1 in local economic activity. And that's something you might have heard before. And so I'm going to explain what that last bullet really means. So SNAP benefits are targeted strictly for food. So for many, this means they don't have to use their limited cash from their paycheck for groceries. So they can use their paycheck money for things like rent or mortgage, transportation, utilities, medical bills. This boosts spending throughout the entire local economy, not just the grocery store. And so when we see cuts to SNAP, we also see that that trickles down through an entire community, because not only is a family not getting enough food to eat, the grocery store is no longer getting those dollars to sustain them. And then the people's mortgages, their medical bills, those things can actually get unpaid because we don't have that trickle down effect that SNAP offers. Whenever we hear some elected officials talk about people who are on SNAP, they want us to believe the worst of them. I'm not going to repeat any of the things that we often hear them say, but these statistics show you who is really on SNAP in Kansas. 65% of SNAP recipients are in families with children, 36% are in families with members who are older adults or are disabled, and 44% are in working families. And when I look at these numbers, for me, the reality is that SNAP participants are often caregivers to either their children or other loved ones. They're not the people that some elected officials would want you to believe. So even though SNAP is a federal program, states are given a lot of flexibility to administer the program. And Kansas has fully taken advantage of the flexibilities offered by the federal government. And they did this mainly in 2015 and 2016 when they passed a set of laws known as the HOPE Act that really made it more difficult for individuals in Kansas to access SNAP benefits. And we'll talk about those numbers in just a moment. But you can, just looking at the numbers on this chart, I think you can see that, again, and that race to the bottom, Kansas is succeeding. We're ranked 4th from the bottom in SNAP accessibility, 5th lowest rate of eligible people receiving food assistance. About 71% of Americans eligible for SNAP in Kansas participate in the program. So there's even more people who could participate. And just because I wanted to make sure you knew how much money we're talking about, the average benefit is $182 per person per month. So the HOPE Act really created a lot of administrative and legislative barriers. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about what those are. just so you can see, some of the things that we've already put into place to make it hard. And then we're going to talk about the things that we're going to make it even more difficult to access SNAP benefits. So first of all, the SNAP application is long and it's complex. The SNAP application is 16 pages, but if you're applying for food, cash, and child care assistance, the application is 33 pages. And I know, I get what people are saying that, if you want to access these programs, you have to fill out the paperwork. But I encourage you to look at this application on DCF's webpage. It is long and it is burdensome. And I think for some people, it is so overwhelming to complete that they just opt out, which I would assume is just one of the many tactics that we see by the length of SNAP application. And I just can't believe that there isn't a way to streamline the application process. In the HOPE Act, the Kansas legislature also created the drug-related felony ban. This law, permanently bans people with 2 or more drug-related felonies from SNAP. This is the only crime where one is punished with a lifetime food ban. So even after they've served their time in prison, and when they get out, when life is hard, when you have to check the box to say that you are a former, convicted felon, and the housing application on a job application, now you can't even get food assistance benefits. But what makes this particularly awful is that if someone is released from prison and they go back to their family, if their family applies for SNAP benefits, that person, the person who just got released from prison, their income is still counted in the SNAP application, but then they're excluded from receiving benefits if their family is approved for SNAP application for SNAP benefits. So if you have a family of 5, you got to count the 2 parents' income, but you're only going to get benefits for 4 people. It's just a crazy system that counts their income but denies them food. And, and when we talk about wanting people to be rehabilitated when they exit prison, we're not doing them any favors. We're definitely not making it easier as a state. The next category on non-citizen documentation is kind of similar to the drug felony ban. If a family has an ineligible non-citizen in their home, their income must count towards their SNAP applications, but again, they will not receive the SNAP benefits. So again, you can have a family of 5 getting SNAP benefits for a family of 4, which just means they're just trying to stretch their food benefits across 5 people. And then the last is sort of where this chart also goes into this conversation. A lot of times we talk about to be able to be eligible for SNAP benefits, you have to be at 130% of the federal poverty line. So I just wanted you to see what those numbers look like. Some states have a policy. So let me just back up. So there's how much money you can make, and then there's the assets you're also allowed to have if you apply for SNAP benefits. So in terms of the gross monthly incomes, some states have a policy which allows some households to have an income level higher than this and helps them kind of gradually ease off of SNAP over time instead of having like that SNAP cliff, like all of a sudden your family of 4 makes $3,485 and you're off SNAP, according to this chart. But in other states, it's more gradual, like your benefits would reduce over time. The federal government allows states to have flexibility to ease people off SNAP. Unfortunately, the Kansas legislature has outlawed this option. But then SNAP eligibility is also about how much in assets your family has. So all households may have up to $3,000 worth of resources or $4,500 in resources if one member in the household is 60 or older or disabled. So for purposes of food assistance, if you go to apply for SNAP and they say, oh my gosh, you have $3,001 in the bank, which we should all have a rainy day fund because life is expensive, you will be denied access to SNAP benefits. This sort of asset test, could be waived by the Kansas government, by the Kansas legislature, like it is in other states, but Kansas has decided not to allow that. So there's flexibility. Our state can give on income and assets, but they decided that they don't want to do that. So they're just really trying to target the poorest of the poor in these, and anyone who's trying to get ahead is just going to be taken off benefits which of course just turns into this cycle that's just ever repeating about needing to get into SNAP benefits. So that was a really quick overview of just some of the laws and statutes that we have in place right now in Kansas that have made it more difficult for people to access SNAP benefits. There's more, and I could talk a lot more about those, but I just want to kind of highlight some of the biggest ones because I really wanted to focus more of our time on the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and what it has done to decimate SNAP at the federal level. Um, so buckle up because it is interesting and it is hard and it's going to be expensive for our state. Um, One of the first things that we have seen is that the One Big Beautiful Act has shifted cost of SNAP to the states. So until now, the federal government paid 50% of the administrative cost of running SNAP. Starting in fiscal year 2027, Kansas must start paying, in every state, must start paying 75% of our administrative costs. This will cost the state of Kansas $20 million more just to keep the program running. But that's not all. For the first time ever, states will also have to pay part of the actual SNAP benefits if their state's payment error rate exceeds federal targets. So the SNAP error rate is a measure of how accurately state agencies determine eligibility and benefit allotments. And so this error rate is, it's probably like an overpayment or an underpayment to a Kansan who received SNAP benefits. These are errors, these are human errors, but others would have you believe that errors and fraud are the exact same thing, and that is not the case here. I mean, this is just really simple data processing mistakes made by humans. And so because of those errors, if a state errors rate is under 6%, then there's no cost sharing. We won't have to pay any of the benefits. But if our cost, but if, and then there have been years that, let me back up. So if your error is under 6%, then there's no cost sharing. Our current error rate is just under 10%. And so that means that we would have to pay 15% of the total SNAP benefits, which would cost another $40 million per year. Now, our error rate has fluctuated over the course of the years. There have been years where it was less than 1%, and we wouldn't have to pay any of the SNAP benefits. DCF is working to decrease this error rate, but this kind of unpredictability every year could just wreak havoc on our state budget, not knowing from one year to the next how much we're actually going to have to contribute to the SNAP benefits. Because all told, I mean, we're looking at a $60 million increase just to administer the SNAP benefits, money that we haven't had to spend before. And I think what's especially frustrating is that we as Kansans and as Americans, we're already paying for SNAP to the federal government. And now with these changes, we're going to have to pay for SNAP again at the state level. It just doesn't seem right that, we keep getting squeezed by having to pay more and more of this. And it just ultimately, the state of Kansas is going to have to either raise their taxes or cut programs in other areas. But this is an expense that we just cannot afford. The next big change is there are new work requirements, which can be detrimental to Kansas because it ignores reality. I showed you the percentages of who is on SNAP, and they're just largely families or caregivers. But the state of Kansas and the federal government really want to believe that this narrative of who is on SNAP and whether or not they're working. So they have done a few things to raise the age limit for being required to take part in a work or educational training program. And what these new rules do is they really ignore the realities of what so many Kansans are going through. So I think about the person who's disabled but has a pending, but who has been denied SSI benefits. I know those people who have been fighting to get on disability for years and haven't been able to do so, and they physically cannot work. They'll be denied food assistance benefits. Then there's the people in a manufacturing town. I live in Emporia, and we have a lot of manufacturing plants. Many manufacturers, they cannot give their employees like the consistent 40-hour work week their work weeks are fluctuating. And so if they don't have reliable income, but they're told that they can't qualify because they're not working enough hours, even though they have a job that they're trying to get enough hours for, they will be denied benefits. And then I think it just also ignores the reality of too many people who are taking care of family members who are living with them, who might be disabled or are older. And then there's a few that I just cannot wrap my head around. In previous years, Congress has recognized that some groups face unique barriers to employment and exempted them from work requirements. So think about veterans, former foster youth, and individuals experiencing homelessness. They can no longer, they are no longer exempt from the work requirement. Just full stop. It happened almost immediately. So this means that people who've already sacrificed for our country, young adults aging out of the foster care system, who often have no support network when they exit the foster care system, they'll lose access to their food assistance benefits. And then another major change is the loss of eligibility for many lawfully present non-citizens. So lawfully present non-citizens are refugees, asylum seekers, trafficking survivors. Under the bill, many of these residents will lose that support despite being legally present and authorized to work in the United States. These are families who fled violence or persecution and are trying to rebuild their lives here. So again, taking away food assistance increases hunger and stability for some of our state's most vulnerable residents. And so in our calculations in the fall, we think that will impact about 3,000 folks who are in Kansas right now. And then another kind of odd one was the elimination of the SNAP Ed program. This is the education arm of SNAP that provided education on things like stretching food budgets and cooking healthy meals. I mean, those programs were cut. I mean, if we're all about making America healthy again, why would we eliminate a program that is trying to do just that? So I know that was a quick overview also, but because there's so much to take in about just these laws that are going to really make Kansans hungrier. But there's also, changes that are going to impact Medicaid and the child tax credits as well. And we haven't even touched on those just yet. And I do encourage you, if you don't already follow the Alliance for Healthy Kansas or Kansas Action for Children, sign up for their weekly emails, follow them on social media because they're working on these issues and can provide you even more insight on how the Big Beautiful Bill is going to harm their work. So the OBBA, as we know, passed. I think we were a little stunned about how quickly it all came together and passed. And, as in typical Kansas fashion, this legislature took a look at the OBBA and said, you know what, we can do one better, federal government. And so they are working really hard to codify the elements of the One Big Beautiful Bill into Kansas law. This is horrible because this means that if Congress were ever to repeal pieces of the legislation, it would still be the law of the land here in Kansas. And I have full faith that, when we see some turnover in Congress this year or in 2 years, we will see some repeals of the One Big Beautiful Bill. But if Senate Bill 363, which is before the legislature right now, if it passes, this means that these laws will stay here in Kansas. So I want to kind of talk about what some of that means. And then also, just as I'm telling you this, just think about what you could do to advocate to your own state senator right now to ask them to vote no on this piece of legislation. So the first thing SB 363 does, it takes away Kansas's ability to seek waivers for communities with high unemployment or too few available jobs. So I'm going to say that again because I think it's pretty big. It takes away our state's ability to seek waivers for communities with high unemployment or too few available jobs. So that means that our fellow Kansans, people facing real hardship through no fault of their own, could be denied food assistance simply because they don't meet rigid one-size-fits-all requirements. Until now, DCF actually had the flexibility to respond to local economic realities, and this bill strips them away of that ability. I mean, it makes no sense. And it ultimately just strips compassion and common sense from the system that we have. The SB 363 also requires the state to implement more frequent SNAP data matching than federal law requires. So that creates a lot of red tape that won't improve accuracy, but will increase wrongful termination for eligible Kansans. Again, this is time and time again, we just see this attack on people who are poor. The legislature and the federal government just want us to believe the worst in people who need some government assistance. And so they want to subject anyone applying for SNAP with just onerous data matching laws. And so this means a family's SNAP eligibility could be checked on a monthly, semi-monthly, and a quarterly basis. So it brings harm to families constantly having to respond to these requests. And in terms of an era of government efficiency, it makes really no sense to have, creating more bureaucracy for individuals. SB 363 also prohibits the state from accepting a self-attestation for things like income, residency, age, or household size without verification prior to enrollment. So that means that if you go to make application, you have to have proof for every one of those things, which makes sense, right? But banning self-attestation would harm people who lack documentation, including homeless people, individuals, migrant workers, and mixed status families. I mean, the one thing that I keep thinking of is like, how would I verify my household size if I have extended family members living with me? I guess I can show my tax return for my kids, but how would I account for a mother, a grandmother, a cousin, an uncle living with me? So that one especially is really confusing to me. And then again, as I said previously, it would end the work requirement waiver for veterans, former foster youth, and homeless individuals, and then bans work requirement waivers for able-bodied adults and without dependents. So this bill, S363, is not good. And it has a hearing in front of the Senate Committee on Government Efficiency on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week. On Tuesday, they will hear from proponents, and on Wednesday, they will hear from opponents. And so I would really encourage you, whether you want to submit testimony to the committee or if you just want to see if your state senator is on the Senate Committee on Government Efficiency, call them and tell them to vote no on this bill. And then there's a couple of other things that are outside of SB 363 that I wanted to share with you. So previously I mentioned how the state of Kansas will now have to increase our share of the administrative costs. Well, in a funny turn of events, the House Committee on Social Services budget declined to fully fund the state's portion of the SNAP administrative costs. So what this means is that DCF will have to figure out how to pay for these costs, most likely at the expense of other programs. Like I can't even wrap my head around this because the federal government is saying we have to do it, and the Kansas legislature is saying, well, no, we're not going to do it. So I'm curious how they will come up with the money. Either DCF will have to make cuts to other budget areas, or more, what we're really worried about is that this could just mean the slow death of SNAP in the state of Kansas. Another thing that is a common thing that we've seen in the State House this session is fraud. Everyone is talking about fraud. And, I'm not going to be Pollyanna and say fraud doesn't exist. I know that it does. I don't think it's as broad as we're being led to believe. But now, every time there's talk about spending money on things like SNAP or our school nutrition programs, everyone's talking about the fraud that's happening in those programs. And so the legislature is just really wanting to take a hatchet to them to cut them back instead of finding solutions to eliminate, the fraud that they say is there. And then, earlier Pam and I were talking about some of the funny bills that have come out of the session. And there's a crazy one that would give a bonus to state employees who report activity that constitutes fraud, waste, or abuse, or fund, or of any program administered by a state agency. So they're basically, I don't know, putting a bounty in their state agencies for reporting on fraud. As a friend of mine who's a former state employee said, what could possibly go wrong when chronically underpaid and overworked employees are asked to report on each other. So I always wonder what's going through a legislator's head when they're putting bills like this forward because boy, if I were in the state legislature and I had the chance to write laws, I would think about how I could improve people's lives and not make it harder. But time and time again, they try to make it harder. So as we kind of get to the end, I want to like leave you with some things that you can do. More than anything right now, contact legislators and tell them to vote no on SB 363. Kansas Appleseed has a robust social media presence on Facebook, Twitter, and Blue Sky. Share our posts and alerts to get your own contacts alerted to what's happening and get them to take action on the legislature as well. Donate money, food, and time to food bank partners like Harvesters, Kansas Food Bank, and Second Harvest. Because with all of these bills that we've seen, and if SB 363 does pass, we will see too many Kansans be more hungry than ever before. And then also, like, share your story over social media and send letters to the editor and demand that legislators protect SNAP and not decimate it. So that is the conclusion of my program. And I'm going to just leave you with this slide right now before I take questions, just so you can email me anytime if you have any questions about anything I've shared with you or the work that we've done. But I've given you a very quick overview of what's happening at the State House. And I'm happy to answer all of your questions so you can get clarity on where you can take action.
Wow. Thank you, Jamie. It's worse than I thought.
Mhm.
I mean, I knew it was bad, but wow. Okay. Well, I think should I kick us off, Susan?
Sure.
Okay. Um, just and some of this you answered partially. Like one that occurred to me is that 29% of people that aren't accessing the benefits, and you said one of them might be because of the complication of the form. Um, uh, are there other particular reasons that do you think that, 30, almost 30% of people don't use this?
I think you're right about the form. I think the form can get really complicated. I think that, people are proud. And so, I think we have to realize that there are people who don't apply for SNAP because they don't, it's hard to acknowledge that you need that help. But I don't think we've ever really been able to determine the perfect reason why people don't.
Hmm. Yeah, and I guess that's hard to fathom. Um, what did I just think of? Oh, on the work requirements, and I have a niece. I'm really worried about her. She was a victim of the opioid epidemic, and so I mean, it rewired her brain, and she's tried to work, and it just she can't.
Mhm.
And her twins are going to be 15 years old. So, using them as an example, how would this impact them?
So the way it would impact them, one of the changes made for the work requirements is that if a household had kids under the age of 18, they would be exempt from the work requirement. But the One Big Beautiful Bill changed that to the age of 14.
Right.
So for your family member, they would have to go and work 30 hours a week or do 30 hours a week of job training.
Wow.
And there could not be any waiver given.
Phew. I don't know what they're
And
going
that's different because the state used to be able to hear stories of hardship and
to.
make their own decision, but they can no longer do that.
Wow. Not even if they have a doctor that says, hey, she can't do this. There's just nothing.
I
So
think then they'd have
cruel.
to apply for disability or something, but
Yeah, which takes
and
forever.
which takes forever. So they actually have to be getting it or have an approved application.
Yeah, that's so cruel. And why
Hmm.
why veterans? What is their reasoning on taking
Yeah.
benefits away from veterans?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Wow. I just sorry, I'm
Mhm.
I'm
That needs to be put on social media and asked in letters to the editor as well as
Mhm.
to our legislators.
Right. And
That's
then,
shocking.
and on the unhoused, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, in order to get a job, don't you have to have a permanent address in a lot of cases?
I don't know if you have to have a permanent address to get a job, but yeah.
I'm just wondering how, maybe I'm thinking of course, if you don't have a house, you don't have to worry about utilities. But I thought I had read that with some jobs, which would put the homeless at a disadvantage, obviously.
I think that they would require verification of residence for filing taxes. So at the point that an application is completed, you're providing that address. If you get the job, then they use that to generate your paycheck stub and then, to start collecting your taxes and for your W-2 and things like that. So it
Sure.
is very much a catch-22. And I don't even know if a PO box is recognized as an resident address. I don't think that it is because I think that's come up as an issue on other things as well. PO box versus a street house
A
address.
physical address, right, right. Well, I thought there was something, well, even Social Security, I think you have to have an address to send to. And that might be, I don't know if they accept PO boxes. I can't remember. Yeah. So there again, you're just disadvantaging people even more.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have two questions.
Can
One is,
can we go back? Excuse me, Harriet. We've got some questions in the chat. If you've got a question, put it in the chat because we've got some already in line. If you don't mind, sorry. um, is there committee name, time, and location for opponents' testimony on the Senate Bill 363 on Tuesday?
Yes, so that is before the Senate Committee on Government Efficiency. That the proponents will go on Tuesday and the opponents will go on Wednesday. The committee hearing is at 9:30 a.m. both days in room 144 South in the State House. They do live stream, and if you wanted to give offer testimony, you can do written only, or you could like submit it via WebEx. And I'm going to put in the chat um, just the link to where you can learn about the bill. You can click on the committee's name and you can learn how to submit written testimony. If you do verbal testimony, you have to submit it in advance, and then they'll tell you when to present it.
Okay, and then there is a question. Just a minute, I have to go back there. Are there statistics per county as to how many people are currently on SNAP? Are there some counties where there's a higher percentage of residents on SNAP?
Yeah, we have some of that that data that we can share out. But there is a website. I don't know if you've heard from the United Ways of Kansas about United for Alice. And Alice is a database that helps you learn about like measures of like food security and everything in your own communities. I'll put that in the chat also.
Okay.
And that might be a good place. But if there's a specific county that you're interested in, we can definitely share that with you. But it is available. I'm just trying to think of like the best place to get it. We might just make it live on our social media. I'm going to make a note of that.
Good. Can you explain a little more about why a child would be in shackles to go to court?
The I can't, there's no good answer, frankly, unfortunately. So the United States Supreme Court has ruled that if an adult is going to be shackled when they are making a court appearance, there has to be a special hearing in order for the person to be shackled. And that's right. If someone is really dangerous, then then they should have to go through that hearing and through that process. That doesn't happen for kids at all. There's been no ruling about kids being shackled, so it's all up to their jailer if they determine that a kid, because these are just kids, if they determine that they are dangerous for whatever reason, then they can decide to shackle them. Kids can be in shackles for an entire day when that's the case. They could be shackled when they leave the detention center, when they go to the courthouse throughout their trial or hearing, and then when they make their way back. These shackles can weigh around 20 pounds, and because the shackles are really like wrist, waist, ankle shackles. And imagine a 12-year-old, wearing those shackles. So it's all at the discretion of whoever is, taking them to court. And it's just a bill we've been trying to get passed for quite a while now.
Just seems so cruel.
It
Um,
is.
What is the reason behind choosing having a couple of drug-related um, uh,
Mhm.
convictions
Yeah.
and not
You know,
getting food when you have violent criminals who become eligible for SNAP
mhm.
afterwards?
Right. It dates back to like 1996 when there's a lot of reform going on around around SNAP and TANF and other like assistance programs. And it was also the war on crime. There was like the whole, you know, welfare queen, fraud. So just kind of all of those like tropes that we've seen. And ultimately, this was actually passed by Congress. And they said that states could make their own decision whether or not to give folks with two or more drug felonies SNAP or not. And again, Kansas has chosen to take the hardest path possible. But I think it also race plays into it because at the time, the narrative was that it's Black men who are committing all the drug crimes as well. So there's a lot of components to it, and it's just wild to me because someone could actually commit, homicide or murder and
Mm.
still get SNAP benefits
It's
when they
shocking.
get out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Is there any help for individuals in filling out the forms?
Yeah, so Harvesters is a great example of an organization that will help individuals fill out applications. Like my local DCF office has also been really helpful. And then I think Catholic Charities has helped with SNAP applications in the past. I think especially in Southwest Kansas.
Good. Pam, you want to pick up some questions? There's still questions in the chat, and one of them even
Sure.
involves you.
Oh, yes. And I'm not sure. Let me find that again. There it is. Yeah, one of our Great Bend members is asking, would my 15-year-old niece and nephew need to work 30 hours per week while they are in high school? But I think it would be the parent, right, Jamie? Is that right?
I think that's right. Yes.
Yeah, it's confusing because I
Hmm.
remember reading that in or hearing it on NPR, and I thought, oh my gosh, what they're going to put
Hmm.
the kids to work?
Hmm.
Oh, wow, yeah. Okay, what else do we have here? Um, oh, this is a good one. What's the status of school free lunch program? Is there a possibility for all students to receive free lunch?
Oh, this is another fun bill. So this one is SB 387, if I'm not mistaken. So going back to the fraud argument, um, so there was a report put out by the Legislative Research Department talking about all the fraud that there is in the school meals program. And so right now, federal law says that 3% of all applications need to be income verified in a school district. The Kansas legislature wants that now to be 100%. And as KSDE asked at the hearing a couple of weeks ago, are we supposed to violate federal law or state law? Because that's, what they're asking them to do. So that was just disappointing because, they want to like verify every income. And, again, some might be doing it fraudulently, but others, I think, it could be you filled out the application the first week of school and then mom got a new job in the midway through the year and it pays more and didn't think, oh, I need to redo my free and reduced application. I mean, those are how like easy mistakes can happen. They also want to there's also a program called Community Eligibility Provision, which allows school districts that have high needs to receive universal free meals. There's a lot of calculations to go in to be able to qualify for that program. The legislature now wants to put into statute that if a school district wants to apply for that program, funded by through the federal government mainly, but it's a federal local cost share. The school district has to go to the legislature to ask permission to participate in that program. As a school board member, I'm outraged by it because the legislature shouldn't give us permission to do such things. We have to, and so yeah, again, they're just really trying to make it harder for, people to access food assistance programs. So not a great bill, but then something weird happened and amazing. So I'm really torn about this. One of the things that we've been advocating for a couple of years now is we know kids get on free lunches and we know that kids get on reduced lunches. We have asked the legislature the last couple of years to let any kid who qualifies for reduced price lunches to get free meals. And they
Mhm.
put it into that bill. And so we're excited that they want to do something good for kids, but it's a weird like sandwich of like kick people off free and reduced meals, give kids reduced meals, and make it harder to do CEP. So we don't like the bill because it's a false choice. We don't have to do all of those things. We can just give kids free meals. So they're kind of seeing they're they're making some progress. It's like one step forward, eight steps back on free meals.
Wow. Yeah, and the cost to districts
Mm-hmm.
in labor would
Mm-hmm.
just be ridiculous.
Right. The Wichita Public Schools said that for every application they have to verify, it takes them 2 hours. So if they
Mhm.
had to verify every single application, their food service director said, we'll just turn into an auditing firm instead of a food services department.
Right. And out here in the rural communities, the use of free and reduced lunches is really high
Mm-hmm.
comparatively. And I'm just shaking my head thinking, what? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a question I was just thinking of. Have you or has anyone done a comparison on how SNAP would impact rural communities versus urban? Yeah,
Mm.
it's bad all the way around, but
Mm-hmm. It is bad, and I feel like we have a report or something that we can share. I'll look for it. I'll send it to you. But I think we've done a little bit of that comparison already.
yeah.
Um, I mean, rural communities, especially the farther you get out west, grocery stores are farther apart.
Mhm.
It's really hard, and so we have a fellow who's been working on like rural grocery stores and SNAP. So.
Yeah, I could see it. Most rural grocery stores are working, that close to going under. And I
Mm-hmm.
could see this pushing right over the
Mm-hmm.
edge.
Right.
It,
Yeah, there was another program that we advocated for a couple of years ago. It was called Summer EBT. And so it would give families whose kids received free and reduced meals during the school year, it would give the families $120 per kid in food assistance benefits throughout the summer.
Mhm.
That would have been, if every kid participates in it, that's $33 million that goes into the local economies, which is huge,
Wow.
especially for those rural grocery stores already on a thin margin. And we actually had to fight because the legislature tried to ban Kansas from participating in that program. They were not successful. We beat it back. But again, it's that trickle down, that economic impact of yes, we're feeding a family, but we're also supporting a whole community.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just crazy. It's just so cruel. There's no other word for it. Inhumane,
Mm-hmm.
cruel. Well,
Mm-hmm.
there's lots of actually descriptors, but none of them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it all comes down to we really want to get rid of SNAP?
That's the only way to interpret this, right? I mean, we already have 187,000 people. What would that be of our population? Like, is that 6% of our state population or something, maybe? I mean, like, people are really hungry, and this whole idea that it's their own fault that they're hungry or their kids are hungry, it's absolutely ridiculous, especially when you keep our minimum wage set at $7.25 an
Yeah.
hour. It's and I know a lot of jobs don't pay 7.25, but I think it artificially um, decompresses our salaries because if we raised our minimum wage, a lot of other wages would have to go up as well. And so it's really just about keeping people down because, when people are down and they're struggling to survive, it's also harder for them to participate in democracy, and to get out and vote. So that's what people in power like to do is they like to keep people down.
Hmm. Boy, you nailed it. I mean,
Yeah.
and we're seeing it happen on a huge scale now.
Hmm.
If you can talk to individuals like our mayor, who is also a plumber, and so he was out here just real quickly. So we got on this topic actually, and I said, but Alan, think of it this way. Um, okay, if you've got parents or a single parent and they're working three jobs to try and support two children, three children, four children, how are they supposed to do that with minimum wage like this without extra help? And he paused and he said, well, I actually know somebody like that in our church. And I said, so why do you want to take this away from that woman when she's working as hard as she can? Well, and I mean, it actually made him stop and think. But the problem
Hmm.
is, it's hard to do that. You can only do that for a few people, How
Hmm.
do you get people to have empathy?
Hmm.
That's the
And
question.
and I do want to say in the legislature, we have good conversations with people you would least expect. And so I do want to like uplift that, legislators who we didn't think would ever introduce a bill on our behalf. They're doing it. And so, I think there's just a few that have more power than others that are, making these other bills come to life. And there's just a lot of, national lobbying firms that have
Mhm.
a lot of power too that are getting bills introduced.
That's a good point. Okay. Susan, do you have anything more? Is there
There's
anything?
one last question here. How do
Okay.
we use different messaging to change the entitlement fraud mentality to embrace humanity? And that's a good question. I mean, how do we change the conversation? Because right now, so many people are saying, well, it's illegals that are taking advantage of this, or they should
Mhm.
work harder, or they shouldn't be so lazy. How do we change that messaging?
You know, I actually had this conversation with our contract lobbyist and some staff on Friday, and our solution is we need to offer solutions. It's so easy to say vote no, but go in and offer solutions. You know, there's just I could give example of lots of bills, but I believe that the people who I work, who we talk with in the legislature, they sometimes want a reason to vote no on something, but they don't have a good one. So, like, read a bill, read like the part of the bill that makes you the most angry, and then just like think about a solution. It is not possible on everything because some are just so ridiculous, but offer solutions, and maybe I think that'll take the conversation even farther.
So really, we probably everyone on this call could could do this, could write to their legislature
Hmm.
and
Please
say,
do.
yeah, is there a particular committee they also need to write to?
Right now, a lot is before the Senate Committee on Government Efficiency. And then another committee on the House side is the House Committee on Welfare Reform.
Okay, so government efficiency in the Senate,
Hmm.
uh, and what was the other?
Welfare Reform in the House.
Welfare reform in the House. Okay, so that's good advice to everybody. I've learned a lot. This has been
Mhm.
great.
Well,
Yes,
thank you.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank
I noticed everyone stayed on, so thank you. We are recording this so you can tell your friends about this and recommend that they listen to it, or you can re-listen to it just to think about how to phrase your letter. I think that's good. I would also recommend everybody going to the website of Alliance for a Healthy Kansas because they really are involved in this as well and get on their mailing list. In
Yes.
addition to Jamie's mailing list.
Yes. Good advice. And we just need to do it. Just do it, because this would be devastating for a lot of people that we know in our communities.
Yeah.
It'd be devastating
Terrible.
for our communities, our relatives, our friends. I mean, church community goes on down the line. So thank you so very much, Jamie. Thank you everyone for coming on Super Bowl Sunday.
Yes.
And
the Olympics.
Yes, and the Olympics. Enjoy both. I've been enjoying the ice skating. Woohoo! Ilya. Go, Ilya. Okay. Well, with that, I guess we'll say goodbye and we'll see you in March.
Thank you all.
Thanks.